Tonight, we delve into a story so unsettling, so profoundly tragic, it almost defies belief. A story where the very fabric of identity is twisted, where the bonds of blood become chains of deceit. Imagine, if you will, a life, meticulously crafted, painstakingly built, only to be ruthlessly snatched away by the one person who shared your very essence, your very DNA. This isn't a tale of mistaken identity in some grand, cinematic sense. No, this is far more intimate, far more insidious. This is the chilling account of a twin who orchestrated a death that never truly happened, not to escape a past, but to steal a future, her own sister's future. Our narrative begins in the seemingly idyllic suburban sprawl of Willow Creek, a place where manicured lawns and friendly waves disguise the quiet hum of ordinary lives. It's here we meet Elara Vance, a woman in her early 30s, whose life, to all outward appearances, was a tapestry of quiet contentment. Elara was a librarian, a lover of old books and quiet evenings, a woman whose gentle demeanor belied a steel core. She was married to Arthur Vance, a kind, steady architect with a reassuring smile and a devotion to Elara that was palpable. They had built a modest yet charming home, filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the quiet murmur of shared dreams. Their life was simple, beautiful, and utterly unsuspecting. But Elara was not alone in the world. She had a sister, a twin, in fact, named Lyra. And here is where our story takes its first dark turn. Twins, as we often perceive them, are connected by an invisible thread, a bond forged in the womb, often manifesting in uncanny similarities, shared thoughts, and an innate understanding. For Elara and Lyra, this connection was both a blessing and a curse. They looked identical, so much so that even their parents, in their younger years, occasionally struggled to tell them apart without a distinguishing mark or a particular mannerism. Elara was the softer twin, the more introspective, the one who found solace in quiet pursuits. Lyra, on the other hand, was a force of nature, charismatic, vivacious, and possessed of an almost magnetic charm. She commanded attention wherever she went. But beneath that captivating exterior lay a volatile temperament, a restless ambition that often bordered on recklessness, and a deep-seated envy that festered like an untreated wound. From childhood, the dynamics between the sisters were clear. Elara, despite her quiet nature, was the one who effortlessly drew genuine affection and trust. Lyra, for all her outward brilliance, struggled to maintain deep connections, her friendships often fleeting, her relationships superficial. It was as if Elara possessed an inner light that Lyra desperately craved but could never truly emulate. This envy, subtle at first, grew with each passing year, fueled by perceived slights and unfulfilled desires. Lyra always felt she deserved more, that Elara, somehow, had unfairly garnered the lion's share of good fortune, whether it was parental approval, academic success, or, ultimately, the love of a good man. The catalyst for the horrific events that would unfold truly began with Arthur. He met Elara at a charity gala, drawn to her quiet grace and intellectual curiosity. Their courtship was a slow, gentle unfolding of mutual respect and deep affection. Lyra, ever present in Elara's life, witnessed this blossoming romance with a gnawing bitterness. She tried to charm Arthur, of course, deploying her full arsenal of wit and allure, but Arthur, steadfast in his affection for Elara, remained impervious. This rejection, subtle though it was, ignited a spark of malice within Lyra that would eventually consume her. She saw Arthur, not just as Elara's love, but as a symbol of everything Elara had and she did not. One crisp autumn evening, a little over a year ago, the unthinkable happened. News rippled through Willow Creek like a cold draft. Elara Vance was dead. A tragic accident, they said. A car veered off the winding road overlooking the local reservoir, plunging into the icy depths. The recovery effort was grueling, the identification difficult, but eventually, the local authorities confirmed it. Elara Vance was no more. The town mourned. Arthur was a ghost of his former self, his grief a tangible shroud. Lyra, too, publicly displayed a profound sorrow, her dramatic sobs and tearful eulogies painting a picture of a grieving sister, heartbroken by the loss of her beloved twin. Yet, Even in the depths of this shared tragedy, something felt off. A subtle discord in the symphony of grief. Arthur, in his darkest moments, would occasionally catch a fleeting glimpse of something in Lyra's eyes. A flicker, a momentary glint that seemed out of place amidst her tears. He dismissed it, of course, as the product of his own shattered mind, attributing it to the trauma of loss. But the seed was planted. A tiny, almost imperceptible seed of doubt that would, in time, blossom into a monstrous truth. The official report stated a loss of control on a sharp bend, a slick patch of road, a tragic accident. But the car, a sturdy sedan, had always been meticulously maintained by Arthur. Elara was a careful, even cautious driver. The circumstances, while plausible, felt too neat, too convenient. No one dared voice these nascent suspicions, not allowed anyway, for fear of disrespecting the dead, or of adding to Arthur's unbearable burden. The world moved on, as it always does, leaving Arthur to navigate a landscape barren of the woman he loved. But what if the accident wasn't an accident at all? What if the victim wasn't the intended victim? Or, more chillingly, what if the victim wasn't truly the victim at all? These are the questions that began to haunt Arthur in the quiet solitude of his nights. The grief, while overwhelming, was slowly giving way to a gnawing unease. Lyra, after the initial period of mourning, seemed to shed her sorrow with surprising speed. She began to spend more time at Arthur's house, offering solace, companionship, a shoulder to cry on. Her presence, at first a comfort, gradually became an unsettling shadow. She wore Elara's clothes, sometimes, claiming they brought her closer to her sister's memory. She adopted some of Elara's mannerisms, subtle gestures, a way of tilting her head, a particular laugh. Arthur, in his haze of grief, attributed it to the deep bond between twins, a natural absorption of traits. But the feeling of disquiet persisted, a low, persistent hum beneath the surface of his shattered life. The story, as it begins, is one of profound loss and an unsettling sense of wrongness. It introduces us to a world where appearances are deceiving, and the most intimate of relationships can harbor the darkest of intentions. The stage is set for a revelation that will shatter not only one man's world, but the very notion of what it means to truly know someone, especially when that someone is a reflection of yourself. The quiet librarian, the devoted husband, the charming but volatile twin, their lives are now inextricably linked, bound by a lie so audacious. It could only be conceived by a mind twisted by envy and a desperate hunger for another's life. The echoes of Elara's supposed death linger, a phantom chill in the air, hinting at a truth far more sinister than any accident report could ever describe. The journey into the heart of this deception has only just begun. The quiet unease that had settled over Arthur Vance's life, initially dismissed as the phantom limb pain of grief, began to sharpen into something more tangible, more alarming. Lyra's presence, once a welcome comfort, now felt like a suffocating shroud. She was everywhere, her shadow falling across every corner of his home, every memory of Elara. It wasn't just her increasingly frequent visits or her uncanny adoption of Elara's habits. It was the subtle shifts, the tiny, almost imperceptible discrepancies that gnawed at him. One evening, Lyra was helping him sort through Elara's old photographs. They came across a picture of Elara from her college days, standing proudly next to a meticulously crafted wooden birdhouse, a project she had spent months on for a local charity auction. "Oh, Elara was so proud of that," Arthur murmured, a bittersweet smile touching his lips. Lyra chuckled, a sound that was just a fraction too loud, too unspontaneous. "Yes, she always had a knack for woodworking, didn't she? Remember that little carving of a squirrel she made for Grandma Agnes?" Arthur paused, his brow furrowing. Elara had never been particularly adept with her hands in that way. Her talents lay more in the realm of words and ideas. It was Lyra, in fact, who had always possessed a surprising talent for carving, a hobby she had briefly pursued in high school. He chalked it up to grief-addled memory, a minor slip. But the incident lingered, a tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the facade Lyra had so carefully constructed. Then there was the music, Elara loved classical music, particularly the ethereal melodies of Chopin. Arthur would often find her lost in a symphony, a peaceful calm settling over her features. Lyra, however, had always preferred upbeat, contemporary pop. Yet, increasingly, he'd find classical music playing on Elara's old stereo when Lyra was around, sometimes even Chopin. When he commented on it, Lyra would offer a vague explanation, something about how she was rediscovering her sister's tastes, a way to feel closer to her. It sounded plausible, but it felt off. It was too deliberate, too perfect. The real shift, the moment the vague disquiet solidified into genuine suspicion, occurred during a seemingly innocuous conversation about Elara's favorite cafe, the Daily Grind. Elara had a peculiar habit of always ordering her latte with an extra shot of vanilla, a detail Arthur cherished. Lyra, attempting to share a poignant memory, recounted a time when she and Elara had gone there together, and Elara had ordered a regular black coffee, complaining about the overly sweet vanilla lattes. Arthur's blood ran cold. Elara hated black coffee. She found it bitter and unpalatable. It was Lyra who preferred her coffee black, strong, and unadulterated. A small detail, perhaps, but it was a detail that screamed incongruity. This wasn't a memory lapse. It was a fundamental misrepresentation. Arthur started to observe Lyra with a heightened sense of awareness, his grief slowly receding, replaced by a cold, clinical curiosity. He noticed the way Lyra held her fork, a subtle, almost imperceptible difference from Elara's elegant grip. He noticed the way she tied her shoelaces a double knot, whereas Elara always favored a simple bow. These were minuscule things, the kinds of details only a devoted partner would ever register. But they were there, accumulating, building a case against the woman who claimed to be grieving for her twin. His suspicions were further fueled by Lyra's financial situation. Before Elara's death, Lyra had always struggled, flitting from one temporary job to another, often asking Elara for small loans. After the funeral, however, Lyra seemed to be living with a newfound ease. She mentioned selling a few of Elara's lesser-known antiques, claiming Elara had wanted her to have them. But the antique collection was modest, and the sums she spoke of seemed disproportionately large for what they were. Arthur, who handled most of Elara's affairs, knew the exact value of her possessions, and Lyra's explanations didn't add up. It wasn't just the money. It was the sudden confidence, the subtle shift in her demeanor, as if a great burden had been lifted, not a great sorrow imposed. The logical conclusion, the one that screamed at him from the darkest corners of his mind, was too horrifying to contemplate. Could Lyra be impersonating Elara? But why? And how? The car accident, the body, the confirmation. It all seemed so irrefutable. Yet, the inconsistencies persisted, tiny thorns pricking at the edges of his sanity. He began to subtly test Lyra, dropping in obscure references to shared memories with Elara, details that only Elara would truly recall. Lyra would usually respond with a plausible, if sometimes vague, answer. But every so often, there would be a hesitation, a fleeting blankness in her eyes, before she quickly recovered. It was like watching a meticulously crafted performance, with occasional, almost imperceptible missed cues. His investigation, initially driven by a desperate need to dispel these terrifying notions, soon became a chilling quest for truth. He discreetly contacted the lead detective on Elara's case, Detective Harding, a seasoned veteran with a reputation for meticulousness. Arthur presented his concerns, not directly accusing Lyra, but expressing a vague unease about certain aspects of the accident, a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. Detective Harding, a man who had seen his share of strange cases, listened patiently, his eyes betraying nothing. He assured Arthur that the case had been thoroughly investigated, but agreed to review the file again, a concession more out of respect for Arthur's grief than any genuine belief in his nascent theories. Meanwhile, Lyra's behavior grew bolder. She began to subtly insinuate herself into Arthur's life in ways that went beyond comforting a grieving brother-in-law. She'd leave notes for him, packed lunches, small gestures that Elara used to make. She even began sleeping in Elara's side of the bed, claiming she felt closer to her sister there. The intimacy was forced, unsettling, a grotesque parody of the life he once shared with Elara. He felt trapped, suffocated by her presence, by the unspoken implications of her actions. He knew, deep down, that he was walking a dangerous tightrope, that confronting Lyra directly could have unforeseen and possibly terrifying consequences. The first major breakthrough came when Arthur remembered a unique birthmark Elara had, a small, faded star-shaped mole just behind her left ear. It was something only he, and perhaps their parents, would know. One afternoon, while Lyra was napping on the sofa, seemingly exhausted from her grief, Arthur carefully leaned in, his heart pounding in his chest. He gently pushed back a lock of her hair, searching. Nothing. The mole wasn't there. A wave of nausea washed over him, followed by a surge of icy clarity. It wasn't just inconsistencies in behavior or memory. It was a physical impossibility. The woman in his living room, the woman claiming to be Lyra, was not Lyra. And if she wasn't Lyra, and Elara was supposedly dead, then who was she? The revelation was a hammer blow, shattering the fragile remnants of his reality. He stumbled back, his mind racing, piecing together the fragments of doubt, the anomalies, the unsettling feeling that had plagued him for months. The woman who had died in the car accident was not Elara, and the woman who was now living in his house, masquerading as Lyra, was in fact Elara. But if Elara was alive and living as Lyra, then who had died in the car? And why? The implications were staggering, terrifying. He had been living with a ghost, a deception, a meticulously orchestrated lie. The true horror of the situation began to dawn on him. His wife, the woman he loved, had faked her own death. But to what end? And what unimaginable secret lay hidden beneath this monstrous deception? The quiet suburban dream had turned into a chilling nightmare, and Arthur was suddenly thrust into a labyrinth of deceit, with his own wife at its very center. The stage was now set for the ultimate confrontation, a reckoning with a truth far more devastating than any lie. The realization that his wife, Elara, was alive and had been living as Lyra, her own twin, since the supposed accident, hit Arthur with the force of a physical blow. The world tilted on its axis. Every shared laugh, every quiet moment of comfort with Lyra, now felt like a grotesque mockery. His grief, once pure and profound, curdled into a bitter cocktail of betrayal and a horrifying sense of violation. He was living a lie, a carefully constructed facade orchestrated by the woman he loved, or thought he loved. But if Elara was alive, who was the body found in the car? That question gnawed at him, a festering wound in his mind. He replayed the day of the accident, every detail, every fleeting image. The call from the police, the blurred photograph of the wreckage, the solemn faces of the recovery team. He remembered the difficulty in identification, the explanation that the fire had badly disfigured the victim. He had accepted it because what else could he do? Now, a cold dread coiled in his stomach. Could it be Lyra? Had Elara murdered her own twin to steal her identity, to escape something, or to gain something? The thought was so monstrous, so depraved, that his mind recoiled, yet it was the only logical explanation that fit the horrifying pieces of the puzzle. Arthur knew he couldn't confront Elara directly. Not yet. He needed proof, irrefutable evidence to back up his terrifying suspicion. He needed to understand the motive, the depth of this depravity. He remembered Elara's old locked diary, something she had kept since her teenage years, a private sanctuary of her thoughts and feelings. He had always respected her privacy, never daring to open it. Now, consumed by a desperate need for answers, he knew he had to. He waited for Elara, masquerading as Lyra, to leave the house for her therapy session, a new routine she had started after the funeral. As soon as the front door clicked shut, Arthur moved with a newfound urgency. He found the diary hidden at the back of a rarely used drawer in Elara's old desk. It was heavy, leather-bound, and secured with a small, intricate lock. His heart pounded as he fumbled with the tiny key, hidden beneath a loose floorboard that only Elara and he knew about. The lock clicked open with a soft, ominous sound. What he found inside shattered him completely. The entries, written in Elara's familiar elegant script, began innocently enough, detailing her daily life, her love for Arthur. But as he delved deeper, the tone shifted. There were increasingly frequent mentions of Lyra, laced with a growing resentment, a simmering anger that shocked him. Lyra's constant demands for money, her reckless behavior, her manipulative tendencies. It was all laid bare. Then came the chilling entries, detailing Lyra's spiraling gambling debts, her involvement with dangerous people, loan sharks who were threatening her life. Lyra had accumulated an astronomical debt, far beyond anything she could ever hope to repay. And then the revelation. Lyra had approached Elara, desperate, pleading for help. She had proposed a horrifying scheme. Fake her own death, collect on a substantial life insurance policy Lyra had recently taken out, with Elara as the beneficiary, a fact Lyra had conveniently forgotten to mention, and used the money to pay off her debts. Elara, initially horrified, had resisted, but Lyra, ever the manipulator, had played on Elara's deep-seated sense of familial obligation, her innate desire to protect her twin, even from herself. Lyra had painted a picture of dire consequences, not just for herself, but for Elara and Arthur as well, implying that the loan sharks wouldn't hesitate to target them if the debt wasn't settled. But the final, most damning entry, dated just days before the accident, revealed the true, sickening twist. Elara had agreed to the plan not to save Lyra, but to become Lyra. The diary detailed Elara's growing resentment towards her own life, a quiet dissatisfaction she had carefully hidden. She felt overlooked, overshadowed by Lyra's flamboyant personality, even with Arthur's love. She yearned for a different life, one free from the constraints of her perceived normalcy. The insurance policy was the key. She would fake Lyra's death, ensuring the loan sharks were paid off and leaving a clean slate, then assume Lyra's identity, using the insurance money to escape her own life and build a new one. The car accident was a meticulously planned deception, designed to appear as a tragic misstep, but in reality, it was a calculated act of identity theft, a murder by proxy. The victim in the car was indeed Lyra. Elara had drugged her, put her in the car, and then sent it plunging into the reservoir, staging the scene to look like an accident. Arthur staggered back, the diary falling from his numb fingers. The air in the room felt suddenly thin, suffocating. His wife, his gentle, loving Elara, was a cold-blooded murderer. She had not only faked her own death, but had orchestrated the death of her own twin, all to steal a new identity and a fresh start. The sheer audacity, the chilling premeditation of it, was almost incomprehensible. He had been living with a killer, a master manipulator, a woman who had meticulously erased her sister from existence and then stepped into her shoes, all while playing the grieving twin. Just then he heard the front door open. Elara as Lyra was back. His heart hammered against his ribs. He quickly shoved the diary back into its hiding place, his movements clumsy, adrenaline coursing through him. He had to act normal to maintain the facade, at least for now. He couldn't let her know what he had discovered. Not yet. Elara walked into the living room, a soft smile on her face. "Rough day at therapy, but I think I'm making progress," she said, her voice a perfect imitation of Lyra's. Yet to Arthur's ears, it was now a discordant symphony of lies. He forced a smile, a weak, trembling imitation of his usual warmth. "That's good, Lyra. That's really good." The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with unspoken truths. Arthur looked at the woman before him, seeing not the comforting presence of his sister-in-law, but the chilling reflection of a murderer. He saw the cold calculation behind the feigned grief, the ruthless ambition behind the gentle eyes. The climax of this horrifying saga wasn't a physical confrontation, but a silent, internal shattering. Arthur was now faced with an unbearable choice. Expose his wife, the woman he once loved, and destroy his own life in the process, or live a lie, trapped in a house with a killer, forever haunted by the ghost of a twin who had been sacrificed for a new beginning. The game of cat and mouse had just begun, and Arthur, unknowingly, was the mouse, ensnared in a web woven by the woman who was once his closest confidant. The truth, finally revealed, was far more monstrous than any fabricated death. The revelation of Elara's monstrous deception left Arthur in a state of profound shock, a numb despair that settled deep in his bones. He moved through the days in a haze, feigning normalcy, playing along with the charade that Elara, as Lyra, meticulously maintained. Every casual touch, every shared meal, every whispered word of comfort from her felt like a betrayal, a chilling reminder of the cold-blooded calculation that lay beneath her familiar features. He was living with a murderer, a woman who had extinguished her own sister's life to steal her identity, all for a twisted sense of freedom and financial gain. His mind raced constantly, grappling with the impossible choices before him. Going to the police seemed the obvious solution, but the thought of tearing his world apart, of exposing the woman he had loved as a monster, was a terrifying prospect. The public scandal, the endless questions, the destruction of everything he had ever known. It was almost as daunting as living with the lie. Moreover, how would he prove it? The diary was damning, but it was just her word. He needed something more, something irrefutable. And what if she suspected he knew? He was now living in constant fear, every shadow a potential threat, every sudden movement a possible prelude to his own demise. He was trapped in a gilded cage of deceit, the walls closing in with each passing day. He began to subtly search for more tangible evidence, anything that could corroborate the diary's horrifying contents. He revisited the accident scene, now seeing it with new, terrifying eyes. He meticulously reread the police report, searching for any overlooked detail, any anomaly. He remembered the vague details about the recovery of the body, how disfigured it was, how difficult identification had been. He also remembered a curious detail. Lyra, the real Lyra, had a distinctive tattoo on her left ankle, a small, faded butterfly that she had gotten on a whim in her rebellious teenage years. Elara, the meticulous and reserved twin, had always disapproved of tattoos. This was a crucial piece of the puzzle. Arthur knew he had to get close enough to the victims' remains to verify this detail. It was a macabre, desperate plan, but he felt he had no other choice. He contacted Detective Harding again, citing his continued unease and expressing a vague, fabricated desire for closure, to revisit the evidence just one last time. Detective Harding, still sympathetic to Arthur's apparent grief, reluctantly agreed to allow him supervised access to the evidence locker where personal effects from the accident were stored, including remnants of the victim's clothing and, crucially, any distinguishing marks documented during the autopsy. The moment of truth arrived, cold and clinical, in the sterile environment of the police evidence room. Detective Harding, with a solemn expression, presented him with the autopsy report and a few salvaged personal items. Arthur's heart pounded as he scanned the report, his eyes darting to the section on distinguishing marks. And there it was, chillingly clear, faded butterfly tattoo, left lateral malleolus. It was Lyra. It had always been Lyra. The confirmation was a gut punch, cementing the horrifying truth he had pieced together. Armed with this irrefutable evidence, Arthur returned home, a cold, hard resolve settling in his chest. He knew what he had to do. He found Elara in the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune as she prepared dinner. The mundane domesticity felt like a cruel joke. He walked directly up to her, holding the autopsy report in his trembling hand. "Elara," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "We need to talk. About Lyra." Her hand, holding a knife to chop vegetables, stilled. The cheerful humming died. Her eyes, which had always seemed so gentle, hardened, a flicker of something dark passing through them. "Arthur," she began, her voice suddenly guarded. "What are you talking about? Lyra's gone." "No," Arthur countered, his voice gaining strength, each word a hammer blow. "Lyra's gone because you killed her. You faked your own death to steal her life, to escape your debts, and to become someone else. And I know all about it. I found your diary. I know about the tattoo." The mask shattered. The gentle demeanor vanished, replaced by a raw, naked fury. Elara's face twisted, her eyes blazing with a cold, predatory rage. You searched my things? You betrayed me?" Her voice was low, guttural, entirely unlike the Elara he had known, or the Lyra she pretended to be. "You don't understand, Arthur. She brought this on herself. She was a parasite, a constant drain. I deserved more. A new life, a clean slate." The confession, stark and chilling, hung in the air. The woman before him was no longer the Elara he loved, nor the Lyra he had mourned. She was a stranger, a calculating killer consumed by her own dark desires. The confrontation escalated, words turning into accusations, accusations into threats. Elara, cornered and exposed, lunged at him, the kitchen knife a glinting menace in her hand. A struggle ensued, a desperate, terrifying dance between a man fighting for his life and a woman driven to protect her monstrous secret. The ensuing chaos led to a violent confrontation that spilled from the kitchen into the living room, culminating in a desperate struggle near the fireplace. In the ensuing mayhem, a heavy brass poker, normally used for tending the fire, became an instrument of fate. Arthur, in a desperate act of self-defense, disarmed Elara, and in the ensuing struggle, she lost her footing and fell, hitting her head with a sickening thud against the sharp edge of the stone hearth. Silence descended, thick and suffocating, broken only by Arthur's ragged breaths. The sirens that wailed in the distance were a strangely welcome sound, a sign that this nightmare, at last, was coming to an end. Arthur, distraught and shaken, but undeniably alive, called the police, recounting the horrific truth, the tale of a twin who faked her death to steal a life, only to meet her own tragic end. The aftermath was a blur of police investigations, legal proceedings, and the slow, painful process of healing. The story of Elara and Lyra Vance became a sensation, a chilling testament to the dark depths of human envy and deception. Arthur, exonerated and heartbroken, was left to rebuild his shattered life, forever haunted by the woman he had loved and the twin she had cruelly sacrificed. The story of Elara and Lyra Vance serves as a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and the most intimate of bonds can sometimes harbor the darkest of intentions. It's a tragedy born of envy, a testament to the destructive power of coveting another's life. It leaves us with a lingering question. How well do we truly know those closest to us? And what secrets lurk beneath the surface of even the most ordinary lives? If this haunting tale resonated with you, and you're curious about more true crime stories that blur the lines between reality and nightmare, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel for weekly deep dives into the shadows of human nature, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next chilling investigation. Until then, stay safe and remember, sometimes the greatest monsters are those we least suspect.